This is heartbreaking, friends. Get yourself and family ready for a drone. What is reveals will begin to happen sooner than you think. Tell us where you are watching from, so that we can pray along with you in this season. I have been a pastor for 12 years. I went to church my whole life. My mother took me when I was very small. When I was 22 years old, I became a pastor. I was so happy. I thought I was doing God's work. People listened to me. They came to my church. They cried in the services. They told me I helped them. But something was wrong. I felt it inside me. It was like a pain that would not go away. I was standing in front of people every week. I was talking about God, but inside I felt empty. I did not feel God anymore. I felt something else. I felt like I was pretending. And every time I went to the altar, this feeling got worse. One morning I could not sleep. I was tired, but my eyes would not close. I got down on my knees and I said to God, I need to know what is real. I need to know if I am doing your work or my own work. Please show me the truth, even if it breaks me. That is when something happened that changed everything. I did not fall asleep, I was awake, but I felt very heavy. I could not move my body. And then my spirit was taken away. I was in a different place. I saw a desert, but it was not a normal desert. It was dead. The ground was cracked. I saw people walking, but they were not walking normally. They were falling down. They were crying. Their clothes were dirty and their eyes had no light in them. I saw children. I saw mothers who looked tired. I saw men and women who had Bibles in their hands, but they looked like they were dead inside. I saw pastors and church workers. All of them were there. And the worst thing was this. They all thought they were going to heaven. They did not know they were lost. I tried to scream, but no sound came from my mouth. Then I heard a voice. It was very loud and very deep and very holy. The voice showed me something. It told me that all these people were in churches, but they were not really with God. They followed leaders. They followed signs and traditions. But they did not follow God's voice. They talked about God, but they did not know God. They sang about heaven, but they were walking toward hell. The voice told me there were millions of people like this all over the world. They were in churches, but they were not with God. I saw bones on the ground. I saw bodies that were lying down dead. The voice showed me that these people died while they were in churches. They had no real life. They did not change. They did not turn away from bad things. They did not feel God. I could not stand it. I closed my eyes. And then I was in a different place. It was a garden, but not like any garden I have ever seen. Everything there was alive. The wind made sounds like singing. The grass looked like it was breathing. The flowers moved like they were dancing to worship God. I was not sad anymore. I felt peace. Real peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from words, but the kind that goes into your soul like clean water into a dirty cup. I saw people there. Their clothes were white. Their eyes had light in them. They were smiling. They were touching each other with love. Some were eating fruit from trees I did not know. Some were drinking from a river that was so clear and clean. Everything there felt alive. There was no rush. There was no fighting. There was no person trying to be better than another person. It was like everyone had finally found what they were looking for their whole life. I fell down on my knees again. I could not stop crying. Then the same voice came back. But this time it was like a father talking to me. His voice was soft, but it was strong. He showed me something. He showed me that in the whole world, there are only 3 types of churches that still belong to him. Only 3. All the others are lost. I listened carefully because I knew this was important. First, he showed me a church. It was small and simple. There was no big building. There were not many people. But there was truth. The pastor was reading the Bible with respect and care. People were praying. They were fasting. They wanted to turn away from bad things. There was no one trying to trick people. There was no one trying to show off. The Holy Spirit was the most important thing in that church. The voice told me that this is the church of truth. They listen to God. They obey God. I understood something. Many pastors started like this. But they changed. They stopped being like this. The second church was very different. There was no building. It was outside. People were feeding people who had nothing. People were praying for mothers who did not have husbands. Young people were helping old people. I saw a pastor washing the feet of a sick woman. There was no camera. There was no one clapping. It was just love, just service. And I could feel God was there. It felt like every act of love lit up the sky. The voice told me that this is the church of service. When you help people who have nothing, you help God. When you touch people who the world does not care about, you touch God. I cried again. The third church was different again. It was just a room, no seats, no stage, just people on their knees in a circle. The ground was wet from their tears. People were praying. Some were making sounds like crying. They were asking God to help the world. I saw fire coming from their mouths. This fire was going up to heaven like smoke from a fire that smells good. The voice told me that this is the church of prayer. These people hold the world together with their prayers. They cry for the nations. They ask God for mercy. And I understood something. These three churches do not have big buildings. They are not famous. You do not see them on television. But God is really there. God's presence is real. It is alive. It is active. That was when I understood what God was showing me. It is not about the size of the church. It is not about how famous the pastor is. It is not about how nice the building looks. It is about truth. It is about service. It is about prayer. It is about God really being there. Then the voice said something that I will never forget. He said that the other churches in the world have lost God. God is not there anymore. But many people do not know this. They still go to these churches. They still think God is there. I was afraid. I was very afraid. The voice told me what was happening in these other churches. They were big churches with bright lights and loud music. People were screaming and jumping and crying. But when God showed me the real truth, I saw demons there. I saw dark things. These dark things were standing behind the pastors and whispering in their ears. And the pastors were saying the words that the dark things told them to say. I saw small churches too. The pastors were praying, but their thoughts were about money. They wanted to be better than the church next to them. And behind them, I saw darkness. The voice showed me that many people use God's name. But they are really serving something else. Something bad. And millions of people follow these leaders. They think they are following God, but they are not. I saw churches using God's name to get money. I saw leaders who were not really serving God, but were serving power and fame. I saw churches that looked like big shows. I saw people falling down not because of God, but because of tricks. The voice told me that these churches are not his churches. They belong to something bad. They are using God's name, but they do not really belong to God. I was breaking apart inside. But then the voice said something else. He said that there was still hope. He said that in the world, there are still churches that belong to him. There are still people who really love God and who serve God with true hearts. The boy showed me that these true churches are not concentrated in one place. They are scattered all over the world. They are small. Sometimes they are hidden, but they are light in the darkness. God has always kept some people who are true to him. Then I understood something important. It is not about the name of the church. It is not about what you see on the outside. It is about what is really inside. It is about the presence of God. I saw people. Some were in big buildings, and they were spiritually dead. Some were in small rooms, and they were really alive. The difference was not the building. The difference was God. Some people go to church because their family always went there. Some people go to church because they like the music. Some people go to church because they are afraid to leave. But God was asking me something. If God is not there anymore, why are you still there? That question was like an earthquake in my heart. The voice told me that time is short. God is separating the true from the false, the wheat from the chaff. People need to wake up. Then I heard a cry from heaven. It was not a human sound. It was God's heart breaking because his people forgot about him. God was saying, "Where is the love you felt when you first met me? Where is the passion you had? Where are the tears from your prayers? Where is the hunger to know me?" I understood. The biggest problem is not just lies. It is that people forgot about God. I saw pastors who used to pray on their knees. Now they just read from papers. I saw people who used to fast. Now they count their followers. I saw missionaries who used to cry when they prayed. Now they sell spiritual things for money. God was saying that people changed. They left him. He knocked on the door. He called. But they were too busy with fame and money and looking good. I saw the Bible verse about a church that had lost its first love. The voice said that this is what happened to many churches. They used to love God so much. But now they are just going through the movements. They are acting. The voice was calling people to come back to real prayer, to come back to the altar, to come back to change their hearts, to come back to the Bible, to come back to asking for forgiveness, to come back to God. It was like the voice of someone who loves you so much, but you left him. He still loves you. He still wants you back, but he is running out of time. I saw something at the end, a garden again, but different this time. And the voice asked me a question. Are you in the garden or in the desert? That is when I understood everything. The garden is where people follow God's voice even when no one sees them. The garden is where people want truth. The garden is where people serve others without looking for reward. The garden is where people pray with all their hearts. The desert is where people go to church, but God is not there. The desert is where people sing about God, but live for themselves. The desert is where people are comfortable in their sin. The desert is where churches work, but God is left. I saw the faces of people I knew. Some were in the garden, but so many were walking in the desert without knowing it. They had Bibles in their hands. They wore church clothes. They had church titles, but their hearts were cold. And God said something that made me understand. It is not where you are. It is about your heart. It is about whether God can see you really want him. The voice told me that there are deserts that look like gardens, and there are gardens hidden in places that no one thinks are important. There are simple people with no titles, but they have fire in their hearts. There are brothers and sisters in countries where the government does not allow churches and they pray in secret and keep their faith alive. There are mothers on their knees asking God to save their children. There are young people burning bad things after a secret church meeting. God said that these people are in the garden. Even though everything around them is a desert, God is inside them because the garden is not a place. The garden is where God is. Then God asked me to ask everyone listening something. Do you still feel God when you pray? Do you still cry when you ask God for help? Do you still hear God when you read the Bible? Or has it all become just a habit, just something you do? God is asking people to be honest about themselves. There is no more time for pretending. There is no more time for masks. Now it is just you and God. No church, no pastor, no title, just your heart standing in front of God. And the question is this: are you in the garden or are you dying in the desert and you do not even know it? The voice was calling people back. He still loves them. He still wants them back. He still opens his arms. But he will not force anyone. He only comes in if you open the door. And the decision is yours right now. I woke up from this vision and I was breaking apart. My whole understanding of the church was shattered. I knew I had to tell people about what God showed me. Even if people do not listen, even if people get angry with me. even if they do not believe me. God told me this message had to be told. The time for pretending is over. The time for separating is now. He showed me that his people need to wake up. They need to look at their churches with real eyes. They need to ask themselves if God is really there. They need to listen to God's voice and not just any pastor's voice. Many leaders are leading people in the wrong direction, and if people follow them without thinking, they will be lost too. There are three kinds of churches that still belong to God: the church of truth, the church of truth, the church of service, the church of prayer. Everything else is something else. If your church is not one of these three things, then you are in danger. You need to think about where you really are. But there is still hope. God is still calling. He still wants people to come back. I do not know your situation. I do not know your church, but God knows. Ask Him. Pray, fast, read the Bible. Listen to God's voice. Are you in the garden or in the desert? That is the real question. And only you and God can answer it. The time is now. The door is closing. God is calling one more time. Will you answer?